During 1965, North Vietnam's AAA inventory expanded from an estimated 1,000 guns to 2,000 pieces and about 400 anti-aircraft sights by year's end. These consisted primarily of 37 and 57 millimeter guns, but included a few 85 millimeter and 100 millimeter weapons as well. Smaller but deadly automatic weapons, which inflicted much of the losses and damage to U.S. aircraft, also proliferated.
The night flights were the worst, because that's when the tracers really jump out. During the day, you can't really see the tracers that well. But at nighttime, when they started coming up, it was like a Christmas party. The United States, we had red tracers, and the Russians, they had they were using Russian and Chinese rounds, and theirs were green. And once they got you see a firefight, it just looked like Christmas. It's unbelievable. And then every night, I mean, there's always something going on.
The Soviet surface-to-air missiles were first detected by a SAC U-2 aircraft on April 5, 1965. By year's end, U.S. Air Force and Navy reconnaissance had pinpointed 56 SAM sites. The North Vietnamese, who took great pains to conceal them, readily abandoned sites to build new ones. By building a large number of sites, some of them equipped with dummy missiles to deceive Air Force crews, they were able to use a launch and move tactic. They employed a similar tactic with their AAA guns, as Commander James Stockdale learned to his misfortune on his last mission of the war.
We were assigned to Than Hoa Bridge strike the last day of our at sea period. We were going to Hong Kong the next day.
Stockdale was not scheduled to fly that day, but at the last minute decided that he would fly his A-4E Skyhawk along with the strike group.
I let the Marines take their own airplanes. They were going to take all the F-8s. I just wanted myself to be there as a kind of in case. And we had about 27 planes going with us that day, I think.
Even before reaching the North Vietnam shoreline, the mission was in trouble.
We were just reaching the beach when we had sent ahead a weather plane, and he said, it's 0-0 at the bridge. By that he meant that the visibility was 0 at sea level. It was impossible target to hit under the conditions that we had in the weather.
With the attack on the bridge aborted, Stockdale had to find a place to release his bombs before heading back to the carrier and shore leave in Hong Kong.
I hadn't assigned myself as a wingman, but we had the executive, 163 was right there with me. He said, I'll go with you, and we went up to, this was all downhill. All we had to do was go up and get rid of our bombs, and these were smaller bombs on the A4s. I had found an area up to the north where I had almost always brought my excess bombs back and dropped them into a rail yard where boxcars were parked. I figured they did some good. I'd been up there the day before.
Unlike the day before, the North Vietnamese had a surprise waiting for the Navy flyers.
When we rolled in at low level, we were going to use this, what they call the snake eye delivery technique, which is low altitude, flat to the ground. I had just pickled off the bombs when I heard this boom, boom, boom over to the right, and it's a loud engine in that airplane, but I was close enough to this thing to see a wheeled vehicle on which was mounted a 57 millimeter gun. They weren't there yesterday, but here they were. And I had a plane on fire, and I was out of that plane in the ejection seat, and we were treetop level. We were pretty low. So I had a very short ride to the ground.
Free from the burning plane, Stockdale's real troubles were about to begin.
I could see the bullets ripping my parachute. I landed, I hooked a tree, but that didn't last long. I was finally on the ground with on my own feet when the mob, which was thundering down the street, it's like every little town in Illinois, every little town in the world, they've got a bunch of teenage or early 20s goons who were, they're going to defend the honor of the city. And this was and boy, they hit me like a pack of, like a quarterback sack. And then I had about a minute of being twisted and bent and kicked, but I wasn't really conscious of what was happening, except that I was being bashed heavily. And then a guy with a pith helmet, I saw his helmet later, he blew a whistle, and that ended that phase. And this guy, civilian with a pith helmet, took charge.
A truck soon appeared and took the Navy commander to what would be his home for the next 7 years.
I arrived in prison in a stretcher that had been put in the back of an old truck that I finally was put in to get up to Hanoi.
In recognition of his heroic resistance to the North Vietnamese and his willingness to sacrifice his life rather than capitulate to their continued demands, in 1976, then Rear Admiral James B. Stockdale was awarded the Medal of Honor. In addition to the anti-aircraft and missile fire, another key element of Hanoi's air defenses was the North Vietnamese Air Force, which was equipped with 50 to 60 MiG-15s and MiG-17s, plus a few IL-28 bombers. Although the MiGs began challenging U.S. strike aircraft at an early date, they did not become a serious threat until 1966-67. The MiG-17s were not as fast as their American opponents, but the MiG was very agile, and they were to cause the Americans considerable problems in air combat. F-105s could protect themselves to some extent and score victories over MiG fighters with both Sidewinder missiles and the internal 20mm gun, but losses began to mount. The arrival in Southeast Asia of the McDonnell F-4 Phantom heralded a new era as the great range, load, and speed of the aircraft enabled more targets to be attacked. At first, the F-4s were only used in the bombing role, with much of the same tactics as employed by the F-105s.
We would probably come in around 3,000 feet or stay down low. Our bombing pattern was we rolled in, we're going 540 knots, and that's the speed that you're supposed to drop your bombs at. And we're at 6,000 feet, and you roll in, you dive bomb at a 30-degree angle, and you dive down to 3,000 feet, and you release your bombs at 3,000 feet, and you pull out at 1,500 feet, because when the bomb hits the ground, it hits the ground probably about the same time you hit 1,500 feet. And if you go low, the bomb fragments can come up to 1,500 feet. And a number of guys have shot themselves down by going lower than that and having the fragments from their bombs shoot them down.
Weather was a big factor in the air war in Vietnam.
Some days when the weather is overcast is lower than 6,000 feet, you have to have a different bombing pattern. We had bombs called snake eyes. They're big iron bombs, 500-pound bomb. It had fins on the back of it like an umbrella, that when it dropped away from the airplane, a wire pulled a pin out of these veins that opened up like an umbrella, so that it retarded the speed with which the bombs dropped, so that you could, if you were dropping at 500 feet or 1,000 feet, you could get out of the way before the bomb hit the ground.
The low-level attacks were effective in taking out the target, but increasingly effective communist anti-aircraft defenses and attacks by cannon-firing MiG fighters required a change. A favorite MiG tactic was to pop up suddenly and try to force the heavily laden F-105s to jettison their bombs before reaching their targets. The F-4 switched from being the hunted to being the hunter. The 8th Tactical Fighter Wing, known as the Wolf Pack, under the command of combat veteran Colonel Robin Olds, laid a trap for the MiGs. Nearly 100 fighters followed exactly the same pattern as that regularly used by the bombing F-105s and F-4s, but these aircraft carried only air-to-aircraft missiles. The MiGs, under the control of excellent ground radar, soon intercepted the force. Sidewinder-equipped Phantoms flew at low altitudes to enable their pilots to spot the MiGs earlier and then used their higher acceleration and speed in hit-and-run tactics. They avoided turning fights because the MiGs had great maneuverability. In the ensuing battle, 7 MiGs were destroyed without loss to the Americans, Olds Bag 2. Following this action, which was to remain one of the largest fights of the war, the North Vietnamese were considerably more cautious with their interceptions. The EC-121s helped materially by alerting the F-4s to the presence of the enemy aircraft. During 1966, U.S. fighters shot down 23 MiGs, 17 of them credited to Air Force crews, as against a loss of 9 aircraft, 5 of them Air Force. At the same time as the MiGs were being tamed, the SAMs became an ever-increasing problem, as supplies of the Soviet SA-2 guideline established themselves around targets in the north. On July 23, 1965, after several months of U.S. Air Force operations against North Vietnamese targets, the first F-4C was downed by an SA-2 missile. 4 days later, with Washington's approval, Air Force Thunderbirds mounted the first strike of the war against the SAMs. In August, a Navy aircraft was downed by a SAM, which led to a series of special U.S. Iron Hand missions aimed at North Vietnam's rapidly expanding SA-2 sites. By mid-1965, the SA-2s were credited with shooting down most of approximately 50 Air Force and Navy aircraft lost over North Vietnam. To combat the SAMs, the U.S. Air Force deployed Wild Weasel F-100s and F-105s. These carried extra electronics and Shrike anti-radiation missiles, ARMs, which homed in on the radar emissions of the Song guidance system of the SA-2. Under the code name Iron Hand, the Wild Weasels and their naval equivalents streaked in ahead of the main attacking force to try to surprise the SAM forces before the main strike arrived. The sum of the enemy's array of AAA guns, automatic weapons, SAMs, and the MiG force, backed up by an expanding defense radar complex, enabled Hanoi to build one of the most formidable air defense systems ever devised. Many Air Force, Navy, and Marine officers and pilots who felt that their hands were tied behind their backs considered the long air campaign to be a violation of the basic principle of combat: when you fight to win. Despite all the restrictions, the on-again, off-again mood of the campaign, and the general confusion, Rolling Thunder did more damage to North Vietnam than is generally recognized. In the years since the war, a number of North Vietnamese officials have acknowledged that at times, 1967 and 1968, the bombing was hurting them badly. The diversion of resources to repair bridges, roads, and railways was a drain on the overburdened society. When Rolling Thunder came to an end with the bombing halt of October 30th, 1968, preliminary peace talks were beginning in Paris. Throughout the operation, what Rolling Thunder was missing was a plan, a policy, and a decision to use the aircraft as they were intended to be used.